The last time I saw my parents and my younger sister, they were standing in the middle of a pristine concrete driveway, screaming their lungs out at a Roanoke County police officer. My sister, her expensive designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly styled blonde hair, was pointing a manicured finger at the front door, calling me a monster, a sociopath, a demon. My father was turning a terrifying shade of crimson, yelling at the top of his lungs about how I had stolen their lives, how this was their property, and how he was going to have me thrown in jail. But as I watched them from afar, taking in the sheer panic and fury contorting their faces, I realized they had forgotten one crucial, undeniable detail about how a house actually works. You cannot rip out the only load-bearing pillar of a home, toss it into the garbage, and expect the roof not to cave in on your own head. For 7 long years, I was that pillar. I was the silent, invisible foundation keeping them all off the street and wrapped in a warm blanket of false security. And when my sister finally looked me right in the eye, standing in the middle of a room I paid for with my own blood and sweat, and called me a piece of garbage, while my parents just stood there and nodded, telling me it was time I found my own place, well, I took their advice. I did not scream back. I did not cry. I did not throw a tantrum. I just walked out. 19 days later, they found out exactly who owned the roof over their heads. My name is Sutton. I am 28 years old, and I have lived in Roanoke, Virginia, my entire life. For the past 9 years, I have worked my way up in a heavy commercial roofing company. I started at the very bottom as a dispatcher, taking angry phone calls from corporate building managers when their ceilings leaked during summer storms. Today, I am the operations manager. I run crews of tough, gritty, uncompromising men who spend 10 hours a day baking on top of flat roofs in the relentless southern humidity. It is a hard, dirty, unrelenting industry that does not care about your feelings, only your results. Here is a fact about roofing that I want you to remember, because it is the entire spine of my story and the metaphor of my life. When people drive through a nice neighborhood and look at a house, they only see the shingles. They see the pretty architectural tiles, the sleek metal panels, the polished exterior design. They admire the surface because the surface is meant to be admired. But the shingles do not hold the roof up. The real work, the heavy lifting, is done by the underlayment, the heavy wooden trusses, the structural decking hidden deep in the dark, suffocating attic where no human being ever looks. You could strip away every pretty shingle on a house, and the roof would still stand firm against the wind. But if you take an axe to just one of those ugly, hidden trusses, the whole structure collapses in a matter of seconds. I spent my entire adult life being the unseen wooden truss in my family, bearing the crushing weight of 3 other adults who only cared about the aesthetic of the shingles. When I was 21, my grandfather passed away. He was a master carpenter and the only person in my family who ever truly understood the value of hard labor. He left me a small insurance payout. It was not life-changing wealth, not the kind of money that lets you retire young, but it was just enough for a 20% down payment on a modest, beautiful 4-bedroom house here in Roanoke if you stretched every penny. I had been working double shifts since I was 19, saving every single dollar I earned, never taking a vacation, never buying nice clothes, never eating at restaurants. I wanted stability more than I wanted to breathe. I bought that house. My name was the only one on the deed. My name was the only one on the mortgage. It was my sanctuary, built on the foundation of my own sacrifice. My parents, Barrett and Greer, were always struggling, though their struggles were entirely of their own making. My dad had taken an early retirement from a local bottling plant due to a minor back injury, and my mom worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental clinic because she preferred having her afternoons free for watching television and gossiping with neighbors. They rented a cramped apartment across town, and they were constantly complaining about the rent going up, the landlord being unfair, and the world conspiring against them. About 6 months after I moved into my new house, my dad came over for dinner. He sat at my kitchen table, looking at his worn-out hands, playing the role of the defeated patriarch perfectly. He talked, with a tremor in his voice, about how they might have to move to a cheaper state, far away from family, because they simply could not keep up with the cost of living. He looked utterly broken, staring into his coffee mug as if the answers to his financial ruin were floating in the dark liquid. I was young, naive, and desperate for my father's approval. I did not even let him ask the question hanging heavily in the air. I offered. I told them they could take the large master bedroom downstairs. I said they could stay as long as they needed to get back on their feet, save some money, and figure things out. I wanted to be a good daughter. I set the mortgage payment up to pull automatically from my checking account on the first of every month, along with the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance. Because I knew my father was a proud man who cared deeply about his image in the community, I made a silent, fatal sacrifice. When the neighbors asked who was moving in, I let my dad tell them he bought the place for the family. I let him give grand tours of the backyard like it was his kingdom, pointing out where he planned to plant tomatoes and where he was going to build a deck. I became the quiet, unassuming roommate in my own home. I wanted to protect his dignity, thinking that my generosity would be rewarded with love and respect. That was my first mistake, and it was a monumental one. For the first couple of years, it was fine. We had Sunday dinners together. I went to work before the sun came up, and I came home to a quiet house. They had their space, I had mine, and the arrangement felt manageable. But then, the golden child failed at life and came crawling back. My sister, Fallon, is 2 years younger than me. She was a premature baby, very sick in her first year of life. My parents almost lost her, and, because of that early trauma, she grew up wrapped in thick layers of bubble wrap. Everything Fallon did was treated as a miracle. If she drew a messy circle on a piece of paper, my parents framed it. If she quit a job after 3 days because her boss asked her to arrive on time, my parents blamed the toxic work culture and bought her ice cream to soothe her stress. Fallon moved to New York at 22 to become a lifestyle influencer and a wellness coach. She was going to be a star, a visionary, a brand. But the internet is cruel, and views do not pay the rent unless you have a massive, dedicated audience. At 24, flat broke, facing eviction, and drowning in credit card debt, Fallon packed her designer bags and came home to Roanoke. I will never forget the day she moved in. She did not ask me if she could stay. She did not look at me. She stood in the entryway, surrounded by expensive luggage she could not afford, and asked our parents if her room was ready. And my mother, without even glancing in my direction, just said, "Of course, baby. Your room is waiting. We are so glad you're home." I had a terrible, sinking feeling in my gut right then, a cold dread creeping up my spine. I just did not know how bad it was going to get, or how quickly my own house would turn into a prison. How exactly do you defend yourself against people who genuinely believe you owe them your very existence, just because you share the same blood? The invasion of my home did not happen overnight. It is never a sudden, violent explosion when toxic family members take over your life. It is a slow, silent creep, like water seeping into drywall until the whole wall is rotten from the inside out. You do not notice the structural damage until you lean against the wall and your hand goes right through it. Fallon moved into the large upstairs bedroom right next to mine. At first, it was just her suitcases lingering in the hallway for a week, blocking my path to the bathroom. Then, a massive ring light appeared in the corner of the living room, a glaring electronic eye that was always turned on. Next, my comfortable, worn-in reading chair, the one I sat in every evening to decompress, was unceremoniously pushed into the dusty garage. Why? Because Fallon needed the natural light by the front window for her morning vlogs, and my chair did not fit her aesthetic vision. She called the living room her new wellness studio, and suddenly, my presence in it was treated as an intrusion. I want to paint a vivid picture of our daily routines so you can truly understand the sheer, suffocating irony of my life during those years. My alarm went off at 4:45 in the morning, every single day. I would drag myself out of bed, put on heavy steel-toed boots, thick denim work pants, and a high-visibility neon vest. I would drive a dusty, dented pickup truck to various commercial job sites, drinking burnt, bitter gas station coffee to stay awake. I spent my days negotiating with aggressive suppliers, reading complex blueprints, and making sure my roofing crews did not fall off 3-story buildings. I came home 12 hours later smelling like hot tar, diesel exhaust, and exhausted sweat. Fallon, on the other hand, woke up at 11 in the morning. She would glide down the hardwood stairs in a silk robe she bought with our mother's money. She would spend 20 minutes making an $8 organic matcha latte using the premium almond milk I paid for, and then she would talk to her phone camera about healing energy, toxic environments, and manifesting wealth through positive thoughts. Whenever I walked through the front door in my work gear, she would physically recoil, wrinkling her nose and waving her hand in front of her face, as if my hard work was somehow an offensive odor polluting her curated, elevated lifestyle. I was carrying everything. I was the beast of burden for 3 grown adults, and I want to give you the exact numbers, because numbers do not lie and they do not care about family dynamics. The mortgage on the house was $1,850 a month. The utilities, with Fallon running the central air conditioning on full blast all day and night because she claimed sweating ruined her skin barrier, ran about $400 a month. Groceries were a nightmare. My mother insisted on buying organic everything, imported fruits, and expensive supplements to support Fallon's specific wellness diet. The grocery bill cost me at least $600 a month, sometimes more. I was paying 100% of it. Every single penny. My father paid 0. My mother paid 0. Fallon paid 0. But if you walked into that house as a stranger, you would never know I existed. That is the part that slowly breaks your spirit over time. It is not the money. I would have gladly paid the money forever if I had been treated with just an ounce of basic human respect. The breaking point is not the financial drain, it is the silent, methodical editing of your life. It is watching yourself be erased from your own space. One evening in late summer, I came home from a particularly brutal 14-hour shift. A severe thunderstorm had rolled through Roanoke, and we had 3 major commercial roofs leaking at once. I had spent hours in the pouring rain, coordinating emergency tarping with my crews. I was exhausted to my very bones, covered in grime, soaked to the skin, and all I wanted in the world was to sit on my comfortable living room couch, eat a hot meal, and stare blankly at the television. When I walked into the living room, the couch was gone. In its place were 2 minimalist, incredibly uncomfortable velvet chairs in a harsh mustard yellow, and a weirdly shaped, abstract marble coffee table. Fallon was busy adjusting a camera tripod in the corner, fixing her hair in the reflection of her phone screen. "What happened to the couch?" I asked, my voice flat and raspy from yelling over the rain all day. My mother walked in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a decorative towel. "Oh, honey, you're home. Listen, Fallon had a huge brand deal opportunity for some home decor items. The old couch just didn't fit the vibe of her channel anymore. It looked a little tacky and dated on camera. We donated it to a charity shop this afternoon." They donated it. They gave away a piece of furniture I had bought with my very first major promotion bonus, without asking me, without warning me, simply because it did not fit my unemployed sister's internet aesthetic. "I bought that couch," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were shaking with suppressed anger. "It cost me $1,200. Fallon rolled her eyes, not even bothering to look away from her phone screen. "Sutton, please. Don't be so incredibly dramatic and attached to material things. I'm trying to build a legitimate business here. You wouldn't understand the pressure. You just manage guys who hammer nails all day. This is creative work. I need a serene, elevated environment to thrive." I looked at my dad, who was sitting in his own recliner in the corner, the only piece of old furniture they had not thrown out. He did not look up from his newspaper. He just turned the page, deliberately ignoring the confrontation. I did not argue. I was too tired to fight a battle I was destined to lose. I walked upstairs, went into my room, and shut the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my damp work clothes, and opened my banking app on my phone. The auto draft for the mortgage was scheduled for the very next day. I stared at the red button on the screen that said, "Cancel payment." My thumb hovered over the glass. I could end it right there. I could stop the flow of money and force them to face the harsh reality of their situation. But familial guilt is a heavy, rusted chain around your neck. My mom's voice echoed in my head, repeating the same mantra I had heard since childhood. She is your little sister. She had a hard start in life. We have to support her. Family is everything. I closed the app. I let the payment go through, buying them another month of comfort at the expense of my own sanity. A month later, the aesthetic editing of my house reached a new, deeply personal level. I used to have a small wooden shelf in the upstairs hallway where I kept some personal items. I had small trophies from a local bowling league I used to be in, a few framed photos of me and my roofing crews at our annual summer barbecues, and a beautiful little hand-blown glass bird my grandfather had given me when I was 10 years old. I came home on a Tuesday afternoon, and the shelf was completely empty. The photos, the trophies, the glass bird, all gone. In their place sat a single, massive, expensive-looking Himalayan salt lamp, glowing with a dull pink light. I panicked. I searched the house frantically. I finally found my things stuffed haphazardly into a dirty cardboard box shoved in the dark back corner of the laundry room, right next to the bleach bottles and the pile of dirty cleaning rags. My memories, my achievements, the last gift from my grandfather, were treated like offensive clutter. They were packed away so Fallon could have a cleaner, more spiritual background for her videos as she walked down the hall. Has anyone reading this ever lived in a space that you literally own on paper, a place you pay for entirely, but found yourself tiptoeing around the hallways like a ghost so you do not upset the guests living there for free? Have you ever had someone quietly, methodically remove the physical evidence of your existence from a room while you were at work? Tell me about it in the comments below. Because that night, standing in the cramped laundry room holding my grandfather's glass bird in my trembling hands, I realized a terrifying truth. I was not a daughter in that house anymore. I was not a sister. I was just the silent landlord they did not have to pay, and the maid they did not have to respect. The grand illusion of a happy, functional family requires a lot of people willing to look the other way when things get ugly. In our house, ignoring the truth was an Olympic sport, and my parents were undisputed gold medalists. They had spent decades perfecting the art of pretending Fallon was a misunderstood genius while treating me as an endless resource meant to be tapped until dry. This toxic dynamic became painfully, humiliatingly obvious during a family dinner in late autumn. My Uncle Grady had come over to join us. Grady is my dad's younger brother, and the two of them could not be more different. Grady is a career mechanic, a man with engine grease permanently stained into his knuckles, a thick beard, and a habit of speaking his mind without a filter. He was the only person in the extended family who ever truly saw me, who recognized the absurd imbalance in our household. My mother had roasted a large chicken, and we were all sitting around the dining table. Fallon, as usual, was not eating. She was standing on her chair, leaning over the table, taking pictures of her plate from 3 different angles, adjusting the dining room dimmer switch to make sure the lighting perfectly caught the honey glaze on the roasted carrots. "So, Sutton," Uncle Grady said, taking a large bite of potatoes and pointing his fork at me. "I heard through the grapevine your company got the main contract for the new hospital wing downtown. That's a massive job. You must be running ragged trying to organize all that material and manpower." I smiled, actually feeling a rare spark of pride light up in my chest. "Yeah, it is huge, Uncle Grady. A lot of late-night logistics and supply chain headaches, but it is a massive step up for us. If we nail this, it puts the company in a whole new bracket." Fallon finally put her phone down, slumped into her chair, and let out a loud, theatrical sigh that drew everyone's attention. "I just don't know how you do it, Sutton. Being around all those sweaty, uneducated, rough men all day long. It's just so blue collar. Doesn't it severely drain your feminine energy being in such a low-vibration environment?" The entire table went dead silent. Uncle Grady stopped chewing. He slowly lowered his fork to his plate, his eyes narrowing as he looked at my sister. I put my fork down carefully, feeling the familiar heat of anger rising in my neck. "Those uneducated, rough men work honest jobs, Fallon. They build the roofs that keep people dry. And they actually get a paycheck every Friday, which is significantly more than I can say for your feminine energy and your internet vibrations." It was a light jab, Far less than what she truly deserved, and the absolute truth. But judging by the reaction of my parents, you would have thought I had picked up a brick and thrown it directly at her face. My mother gasped, dropping her napkin onto her lap as if she were going to faint. Sutton, that is incredibly unsupportive and mean-spirited. Your sister is an entrepreneur. She is building a personal brand from the ground up. It takes a lot of time to see a financial return on creative investments. You, as an older sister who already has a stable career, should be lifting her up, not tearing her down at the dinner table. She is 26 years old, Mom, I said softly, my voice tight. She hasn't had a real, paying job in 3 years. She lives here for free. My dad slammed his heavy hand flat on the table, making the silverware jump and the water glasses rattle. His face was flushed with anger. That is enough, Sutton. You sit in an air-conditioned office and tell hard-working people what to do. You have a comfortable, easy life. Do not sit there in this house and act superior to your sister just because her path is different than yours. We are a family, and family supports each other without keeping a ledger of who owes who. Without keeping a ledger. The sheer, unadulterated irony of that sentence tasted like copper pennies in my mouth. I was the only one in the entire house with a ledger, and I was bleeding out on every single page of it to keep them afloat. Uncle Grady looked at me, a deep, sorrowful frown carving heavy lines into his weathered face. He didn't say a word to my dad. He knew Barrett was a lost cause, but the look he gave me was full of profound pity. I hated that look. It confirmed that I was a victim in my own home. 2 weeks later, the reality of Fallon's brand building came crashing down on my parents in the ugliest way possible, proving exactly who she was. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water late at night when I heard my parents whispering fiercely in their bedroom down the hall. My dad sounded panicked, his voice cracking. My mother was sobbing quietly. The next morning, the ugly truth leaked out. Fallon had gone into my mother's purse and taken her emergency credit card, a card strictly meant for medical emergencies or sudden car repairs, with a high limit my parents had spent years building. In a single weekend, Fallon had charged over $4,000 on it. She bought a designer handbag, luxury shoes, and a high-end skincare fridge to feature in a luxury lifestyle haul video meant to impress strangers on the internet. When my parents confronted her in the living room, Fallon did not apologize. She did not show an ounce of remorse. She just cried hysterically, screaming about how much pressure she was under to look successful, how her followers expected a certain standard of living, and how she was going to pay them back with interest as soon as her next video went viral and the brand deals started rolling in. Instead of demanding she return the items or kicking her out, my parents comforted her. I watched from the hallway as they actually hugged her, stroking her hair, telling her it was okay, that they understood the immense stress of the digital age, and that they would figure out how to pay the bill. That evening, after Fallon had gone out with friends, my dad knocked timidly on my bedroom door. He looked smaller than usual, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He walked in, refused to make eye contact with me, and stared intently at the floorboards. "Sutton," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "Listen, we had a little unexpected expense come up today. The car needed some serious transmission work, and I'm really short on cash this month. Could you spot me $1,000? Just to help cover the groceries and the electric bill until my pension check clears next week." He was lying directly to my face. I knew about the stolen credit card. I knew the car was perfectly fine because I had seen him driving it that afternoon. He was asking the daughter he regularly berated for being blue-collar and mean to bail out the golden child who had just committed credit card fraud against him. I looked at my father. I saw the deep shame in his posture, the humiliation of having to beg his daughter for money. But beneath the shame, I also saw the stubborn, pathological refusal to hold Fallon accountable for her actions. He would rather lie to me, beg from me, and manipulate me than tell his youngest daughter no. "Sure, Dad," I said, my voice completely hollow, devoid of any emotion. I reached for my laptop on the nightstand, logged into my bank, and transferred $1,000 into his account right there while he watched. "Thank you, sweetie," he said quickly, his voice tight with relief. He backed out of the room like he couldn't get away from me fast enough. "You're a good girl." I closed my laptop and stared at the black screen. That was the exact moment a very cold, very quiet realization settled deep into my bones, chilling me to the core. They were never going to change. No matter how much money I gave them, no matter how much I sacrificed, I was never going to be anything more than an ATM and a background character in Fallon's ongoing tragedy. But as painful as that financial betrayal was, it wasn't the worst of it. Stealing money is one thing. Money is just numbers on a screen. It can be replaced by working more hours. The true breaking point, the unforgivable act that finally snapped the last, fraying string of loyalty I had in my chest, was what they did to my grandfather's memory just a few weeks later. Before I tell you about the final explosion, the moment I finally decided to burn the whole house down around them, I need you to understand the museum of pain I was living in. It was a vast collection of small, daily disrespects, microaggressions, and cruelties that piled up so high over 7 years they eventually blocked out the sun. If you want to know why my revenge was so absolute, you have to walk through these exhibits with me. Exhibit A, the winter parking spot. Roanoke gets nasty, bone-chilling ice storms in January. We have a 2-car garage attached to the house, but one side was permanently filled with my dad's rusty old tools, broken lawnmowers, and junk he refused to throw away. That left exactly one covered parking spot under the carport. Because I left for work at 4:45 in the morning, I always parked my truck under the carport. It was a necessity, so I wouldn't have to spend 30 minutes scraping thick sheets of ice off my windshield in the freezing dark before a 12-hour shift. One night in February, it was sleeting heavily, the rain freezing the second it hit the pavement. I came home late, exhausted and freezing. My spot under the carport was taken. Fallon's little sedan was parked perfectly in the middle of it. I had to park my truck on the street in the freezing rain. The next morning, it was 5 degrees outside. My truck was encased in an inch of solid ice. It took me 45 minutes to chip the ice off my windshield using a plastic scraper. The bitter cold cut right through my gloves, and by the time I finished, my knuckles were bleeding and I was shivering uncontrollably. When I confronted Fallon about it later that evening, she didn't even look up from painting her nails. She just shrugged her shoulders carelessly. I had a fresh, expensive blowout from the salon yesterday, Sutton. I couldn't risk the freezing humidity ruining my hair walking all the way from the street. You wear hard hats and sweat all day anyway, your hair doesn't matter. My bleeding hands meant nothing compared to her hair. Exhibit B, the acoustic guitar. When I was a teenager, before I started working constantly and became the family's sole provider, I used to play the guitar. I wasn't great, I was never going to be a musician, but sitting in my room strumming chords brought me immense peace. I had an old, beautiful Yamaha acoustic that I bought with my very first summer job paycheck. I kept it on a wooden stand in the corner of the living room. I hadn't played it much lately because I was always working, but just seeing it sitting there reminded me of who I was before I became everyone's wallet. It was a piece of my youth. One weekend, I came downstairs and noticed the corner was completely empty. The guitar and the stand were gone. I asked my mother, who was casually flipping through a magazine, where my guitar was. She waved a hand dismissively without looking up. "Oh, I put it out for the bulk trash pickup on Thursday morning. The garbage men took it." Fallon is starting a daily meditation and yoga series on her channel, and she said that specific corner has the best morning energy. The guitar was just collecting dust and ruining the feng shui of the room. It looked cluttered. I rushed outside in a panic, but the street was empty. The trash trucks had come and gone days ago. My mother had thrown away a piece of my youth, an item I paid for, to make room for a meditation corner that Fallon used exactly twice before getting bored. Exhibit C, the birthdays. This is the exhibit that really cemented my place in the family hierarchy, proving that I was not a daughter, but a utility. Fallon's birthday is in May. For her 26th birthday, my parents threw a massive, catered backyard party. My mother spent 3 entire days cooking and prepping. My dad spent hundreds of dollars stringing up expensive fairy lights and renting a high-end sound system. They bought her a massive custom cake from a boutique bakery downtown and gifted her a new ring light and a professional microphone setup they absolutely could not afford, putting it all on a credit card. The house was full of her friends, loud music, and laughter. My birthday is in September. I turned 28 on a rainy Tuesday. I worked a brutal 14-hour shift managing a crisis at a warehouse site where the roof had partially collapsed. I came home at 8 at night, covered in mud and exhaustion. The house was completely dark. My parents and Fallon were sitting on the couch in the dark, watching a movie. "Oh, hey," my mom said, barely glancing away from the television screen. "Happy birthday. There's a sandwich in the fridge for you." I stopped at the gas station on the way back from picking up Fallon's dry cleaning and grabbed it. That was it. No cake. No lights. No party. No presents. Just a soggy, prepackaged turkey sandwich in a plastic triangle sitting next to the leftover organic kale in the fridge. I took the sandwich and walked out to the back porch, sitting on the cold steps in the dark. I didn't want to cry in front of them. But 30 minutes later, there was a heavy knock on the back gate. It was Uncle Grady. He was standing in the rain holding a small, slightly squished chocolate cake from a grocery store, with a single unlit candle sticking out of the center. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the glass door behind me. I didn't want them to see us. Grady lit the candle with a battered lighter, his grease-stained hands shielding the small flame from the wind and rain. "Happy birthday, kid," he said gruffly, his voice thick with emotion. I blew out the candle, and to my absolute horror, a tear rolled down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. Grady set the cake on the porch railing and leaned against the siding. He looked through the glass door at my family laughing at the television, completely oblivious to us outside in the dark. "You know," Grady said quietly, pulling a cigarette from his pocket and lighting it. "When you get a nasty, infected boil on your arm, you can put a bandage over it. You can pretend it isn't there. You can take painkillers to ignore the throbbing. But eventually, the infection spreads to your blood. The only way to save the arm, to save your life, is to take a sharp scalpel, cut the boil wide open, and drain the poison out. It hurts like absolute hell for a minute, you bleed, and it's ugly. But it's the only way you heal." He looked me dead in the eye, the cherry of his cigarette glowing in the dark. "You are letting them rot you from the inside out, Sutton. You are letting them destroy you. Cut the boil." He didn't say anything else. He didn't offer to fight my dad. He just patted my shoulder heavily and walked back to his truck in the rain. I stood on the porch in the dark, eating a piece of cheap chocolate cake with my fingers. I thought about the scalpel. I thought about the poison running through my house. I realized Grady was entirely right. I just needed the right moment to make the cut. And Fallon, in her infinite, breathtaking arrogance, was about to hand me the scalpel herself. The true catalyst, the explosive moment that permanently altered the trajectory of our lives and set my revenge into motion, happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. My crew had finished a major commercial roofing project 2 days ahead of schedule, and I decided to reward myself by taking a rare half-day off. I was genuinely looking forward to coming home to an empty, quiet house, maybe taking a long, hot shower to wash off the week's grime, and actually resting my aching muscles in silence. I pulled my truck into the driveway and noticed the front door was propped slightly ajar. I walked inside, took off my heavy boots in the foyer, and headed down the hallway toward the kitchen. As I passed the living room doorway, I stopped dead in my tracks, my blood running instantly cold. Fallon was in the middle of a massive, frantic cleaning frenzy. She had several large, heavy-duty black trash bags laid out on the hardwood floor. And there, sitting carelessly on top of a pile of discarded fast food wrappers and empty Amazon boxes, were 3 large, rolled-up, yellowed tubes of heavy paper. My heart dropped so fast I felt physically sick. Those were not just rolls of paper. They were the original, hand-drawn, meticulously detailed architectural blueprints of the very first house my grandfather ever built by himself. He was a master carpenter, a man who built things to last centuries, and those blueprints were his most prized possession. Before he died, he gave them to me, knowing I was the only one in the family who respected the trade. They were the reason I got into the construction industry in the first place. I had kept them carefully stored in a hard, waterproof protective casing hidden deep under my bed for 7 years, keeping them safe from light and moisture. I rushed forward, my heart hammering in my chest, and snatched the fragile tubes out of the trash bag. The hard protective casing was nowhere to be seen. Someone had deliberately pulled them out, exposing the old paper to the air. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling violently with a terrifying mix of panic and pure, unadulterated rage. Fallon spun around, holding a pink feather duster. She rolled her eyes, heavily annoyed by my sudden presence ruining her afternoon. "Oh, relax, Sutton. I was looking for a plastic storage box under your bed to store my winter sweaters, and I found those stupid, dusty old posters. They smell like gross mildew. They were making the whole upstairs smell weird. I'm throwing them out." "These are Grandpa's original blueprints," I said, my voice dropping from a yell to a dangerous, quiet, shaking register. "You went into my private bedroom, went under my bed, opened a sealed case, and threw away the only thing I have left of him? They are literally trash," Fallon scoffed, putting a hand on her hip and glaring at me with utter contempt. "You hold on to the most useless junk. It's pathetic, honestly. You're hoarding garbage, Sutton. It's a mental illness." "Do not ever touch my things again," I warned her, clutching the fragile blueprints tightly to my chest, stepping toward her. Fallon's face twisted into an ugly, cruel, venomous sneer. She stepped closer to me, aggressively pointing her manicured finger right at my face. "Don't you dare tell me what to do in my house," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "You are just a piece of garbage, Sutton. You have no taste, no style, and no life. You're a miserable, bitter workaholic who brings down the energy of everyone around you because you're jealous of me." These stupid papers were making my vlog background look cluttered and dirty, so I threw them away. "Get over it and get out of my way." "My house." She called it her house. The sheer audacity of the statement paralyzed me for a second. The loud commotion brought my parents rushing out from the kitchen. My father stepped into the living room, puffing out his chest, instantly taking on the role of the aggrieved authority figure. "What in the world is going on in here?" Barrett barked, looking between the two of us. "She's screaming at me and threatening me over some old trash." Fallon whined instantly. Her voice shifted in a millisecond from vicious and cruel to a high-pitched, victimized squeal. She forced fake tears into her eyes. "I was just trying to organize the house and clean up her mess, and she attacked me." I looked desperately at my father. I held up the yellowed blueprints so he could clearly see what they were. "Dad, look at these." She went into my bedroom and threw Grandpa's original blueprints into a garbage bag. And then she called me a piece of garbage for caring about them. I waited. I held my breath and waited for the man who raised me, the man whose own father drew those very blueprints by hand 50 years ago, to finally draw a line in the sand. I waited for him to defend his father's sacred memory, or at the very least, defend his eldest daughter from a vicious attack in her own home. Barrett looked at the blueprints in my hand. He recognized them. I saw the flash of recognition in his eyes. Then he looked at Fallon, who was pouting and wiping away non-existent tears, looking small and fragile. He took a deep breath, crossed his thick arms over his chest, and leveled a hard, cold, unforgiving stare directly at me. "Sutton, you're overreacting," my father said. The air violently left my lungs. It felt like he had punched me in the stomach. "Your sister is under a lot of stress right now," he continued, his voice rising in volume, meant to intimidate and silence me. "She is trying to build a future for herself, and you are constantly picking fights over trivial things. It's just old paper, Sutton. Your temper is getting out of control. Your sister comes first now. We need peace and harmony in this home. If you cannot be supportive, if you are going to be this selfish and hostile over some old drawings." He paused dramatically, lifting his arm and pointing a stiff finger toward the front door. "Then maybe it's time you found your own place to live." There it was. The ultimate betrayal. He was kicking me out. My father, a man who had not paid a single dime in rent, mortgage, or property taxes in 7 entire years, was kicking me out of the house I bought, the house I paid for, the house I maintained, just so that his 26-year-old unemployed daughter wouldn't have to look at my grandfather's legacy. I looked at my mother. Greer was standing slightly behind my dad, nodding in fervent agreement, rubbing Fallon's shoulder to comfort her. They thought they had won. They thought I was going to cry, apologize, beg for forgiveness, or storm off to my room like a rebellious teenager throwing a fit. They thought I would back down because I had always backed down to keep the peace. They truly believed, in their arrogant delusion, that they held all the power in this dynamic. I stood there in the living room I furnished, standing on the hardwood floors I polished on my hands and knees, beneath the very roof I paid to insure every single month. And suddenly I felt a strange, terrifying calm wash over my entire body. The boiling, red-hot anger evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a cold, sharp, crystal-clear clarity. The festering boil had finally surfaced. It was time for the scalpel Uncle Grady had talked about. I didn't yell. I didn't remind my father about whose name was on the deed. I didn't mention the 84 months of mortgage payments I had faithfully made. I didn't say a single word about the thousands of dollars in groceries, electric bills, and stolen credit cards. I just looked my father dead in the eye, gave him a small, empty nod, and said one sentence. All right. I turned around, carefully carrying my grandfather's blueprints, and walked slowly up the stairs. They thought they had just evicted a useless, difficult, toxic daughter. I let them believe it. I let them feel the sweet triumph of victory. What they didn't know is that they had just pulled the pin on a massive grenade and swallowed it whole. I walked into my bedroom and locked the heavy wooden door behind me, my hands moving with mechanical precision. I pulled a large canvas duffel bag from the top shelf of my closet. I did not pack everything. I did not want to carry the weight of that house with me. I only packed what I truly needed to survive and continue working: a week's worth of heavy denim work clothes, my steel-toed boots, my laptop, a folder containing my birth certificate and social security card, and most importantly, my grandfather's blueprints. I left the expensive mattress, the wooden dresser, the bedding, the decorations. Let them keep the aesthetic. Let them choke on it. I walked downstairs 20 minutes later, the duffel bag slung heavily over my shoulder. The three of them were sitting around the kitchen island, drinking coffee and talking in low, hushed tones, probably congratulating themselves on finally putting me in my place. They stopped talking the second I walked past the doorway. The silence was thick and arrogant. None of them said a single word as I opened my own front door, walked out to my truck, threw my bag in the passenger seat, and drove away without looking back in the rearview mirror. I drove to the outskirts of Roanoke, near the industrial park where the air always smelled faintly of diesel and cut lumber. I checked into a mid-range extended-stay hotel. It was a sterile, beige room with a small kitchenette and a humming refrigerator, but as soon as I walked inside and locked the door behind me, the silence in the room felt like a massive physical weight lifting off my chest. I sat on the edge of the stiff, uncomfortable mattress, opened my laptop, and took a deep breath. The very first thing I did was search the internet for a ruthless real estate attorney. I didn't want a family lawyer. I wanted someone who dealt in cold, hard property law. I found a highly rated lawyer named Mercer, whose office was located in a sleek glass building downtown. I called his office immediately and practically begged his receptionist for a rush appointment, explaining that I was facing a severe domestic property dispute and needed to verify my legal standing immediately. Mercer agreed to see me at 8 o'clock the next morning. Sitting in Mercer's mahogany-paneled office the next day, sipping awful waiting room coffee, I slid a thick manila folder across his expansive desk. I need to know exactly where I stand legally, I told him, my voice steady but tight. And I need to know today. Mercer was a sharp-looking man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit and projecting an aura of absolute competence. He put on his reading glasses and meticulously went through the documents I had provided. He reviewed the original warranty deed. He reviewed the mortgage origination paperwork from 7 years ago. He looked at 84 months of property tax receipts, homeowners' insurance policies, and utility bills. All of them were in my name. All of them were paid from a checking account that solely belonged to me. He leaned back in his leather chair, took off his glasses, and looked at me with a mixture of professional respect and slight confusion. "Miss Sutton," Mercer said in a calm, authoritative voice that echoed in the quiet office. "This is your house. You are the sole grantor and grantee on the deed. Your parents are not co-signers. They are not on the mortgage. They have zero equity in this property. Furthermore, since there is no written lease agreement of any kind, and they have never contributed financially to the maintenance, taxes, or acquisition of the property, they are legally classified in the state of Virginia as at-will tenants, or frankly, just guests. You hold 100% of the legal power here." "So, they have zero legal rights to the house?" "None," I asked, wanting to hear him say it again. "Zero," Mercer confirmed flatly. "If you want them out, we can draft and serve a formal 30-day eviction notice today. The sheriff can deliver it this afternoon." I shook my head slowly, looking out the window at the city skyline. "No. 30 days gives them time to destroy the place out of spite. It gives them time to manipulate me, to cry, to send family members to guilt-trip me, to ruin the drywall and rip up the carpets. I cannot survive another 30 days in a war zone with them, and I won't let them trash my investment." I thought about the roofing trusses again. A slow, methodical demolition of a rotting structure is messy, dangerous, and exhausting. Sometimes, you just have to drop the whole building in one swift motion and clear the rubble later. "I want to sell it," I said. The words tasted like cold, fresh water on a scorching day. "I want to sell it as fast as humanly possible." Mercer raised an eyebrow, surprised by my clinical detachment, but he nodded slowly. "That is absolutely your right. We can arrange for a fast closing if you find a cash buyer. You can list it today." That afternoon, while I was sitting in my truck eating a fast food burger, I received a group text message on my phone from my mother. It was a picture of her, my dad, and Fallon standing in the living room, surrounded by 6 large pieces of luggage. They were all smiling brightly. "Mom, since things have been so incredibly tense and toxic lately, your father decided we all need a mental health break to heal. We booked a 10-day vacation to a lovely resort in Florida. We leave tomorrow morning early. We hope you use this time to seriously reflect on your aggressive behavior, pack your remaining things, and find a new apartment. We will talk about boundaries when we get back." I stared at the text message for 5 full minutes. A 10-day resort vacation. My father had just practically begged me for $1,000 because he claimed he couldn't afford groceries and electricity, and now they were flying to Florida to sit by a pool. I knew exactly how they paid for it. They put the entire trip on a credit card, assuming they had a free, permanent house to come back to and unlimited time to pay off the debt while I continued to fund their lives. They were handing me the perfect, undeniable window of opportunity on a silver platter. "Me, have a great trip. Enjoy the sun. I will have everything sorted out by the time you get back." I hit send. It was the truest thing I had ever texted them in my life. The moment I knew their flight had safely taken off the next morning, tracking it online, I called a highly aggressive real estate agent named Una. I did not want to clean the house. I did not want to stage it with fake fruit and nice rugs. I told her I wanted a fast, cash sale, as is condition, and I was willing to price it slightly below current market value to ensure an immediate, unquestionable close. In the current housing market, a well-maintained 4-bedroom house priced aggressively does not sit empty for long. The agent had the listing live on the private network by noon. We bypassed public open houses entirely and went straight to private showings for pre-approved buyers and wealthy investors who could move liquid capital in days, not weeks. While my family was sipping expensive cocktails by a pool in Florida on my dime, oblivious to the world, strangers were walking through my living room, measuring the walls, testing the water pressure, and evaluating the foundation. By Tuesday afternoon, just 3 days later, we had 5 solid offers. 3 of them were all cash, closing in under 7 days. I sat in my quiet hotel room, looking at the spreadsheet Una had emailed me. This was it. The point of no return. The precipice. Once I signed these electronic papers, the home I bought at 21, the roof I had bled and sacrificed for, The place I thought I would raise a family would be gone forever. I thought I would feel sad. I expected a massive wave of nostalgia or grief to hit me, bringing me to my knees. But as I sat there, looking at the numbers on the screen, I realized something profound. A house is just wood, drywall, copper pipes, and shingles. A home is a place where you are safe, respected, and loved unconditionally. I had a house for 7 years, but I never, ever had a home. I picked up my pen, took a deep breath, and signed the digital contract, accepting a cash offer from a middle-aged couple looking to downsize. We set a hyper-accelerated closing date for the following Monday. The master plan was officially set in motion. The trap was armed and ticking. My family had exactly 14 days left on their luxury vacation, completely, blissfully oblivious to the fact that the literal ground had just been sold out from under their feet. If you are enjoying this story so far and want to see exactly how this explosive revenge plays out, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow, and you won't want to miss the massive fallout when they finally return from Florida to find a new owner living in their house. The closing process was the fastest transaction my lawyer Mercer had ever witnessed in his entire career. We sat in a sterile conference room on a Monday morning, just a few days after I signed the initial acceptance. Across the heavy oak table sat the buyers, a lovely middle-aged couple named Yates. Mrs. Yates was a retired elementary school teacher with a warm smile, and Mr. Yates was a 20-year veteran of the Roanoke County Police Department. They were looking for a solid, single-story home with a nice yard for their rescue dogs, and they had the liquid cash ready to wire immediately. I liked them instantly. They appreciated the solid bones of the house, the upgraded roofing I had installed 3 years prior, and the quiet neighborhood. I did not tell them about the toxic waste dump of family drama currently occupying the property. I simply told them I needed an expedited sale due to a sudden life transition. Mr. Yates, with the sharp intuition of a police officer, asked if there would be any issues with the current occupants vacating. I looked him dead in the eye and assured him the house would be entirely empty and professionally cleaned before he turned the key on Friday. When the escrow officer handed me the final settlement statement, I stared at the bottom line. It was a substantial amount of money, the culmination of 7 years of equity, sacrifice, and forced savings. I signed my name 14 times, sliding the heavy paper across the table. With each signature, a massive, suffocating weight lifted from my shoulders. The transaction was finalized. The wire transfer hit my account 2 hours later. Just like that, the anchor was cut. I was free. That same afternoon, I signed a 12-month lease on a luxury apartment downtown. It was much smaller than the house, just 1 bedroom, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, pristine modern appliances, and most importantly, a secure entry system that required a key fob to even access the elevator. Nobody could just walk in. Nobody could claim my space. I spent my first night in the new apartment sleeping on an air mattress, eating takeout pizza straight from the cardboard box. I woke up the next morning at my usual time, 4:45, out of sheer habit. But instead of rushing to make coffee in a kitchen that felt hostile, I just lay there. I listened to the silence. It was a profound, beautiful, heavy silence. There was no ring light glaring from the living room. There was no sound of Fallon complaining about the temperature. There was no heavy sigh from my father. For the first time in 7 years, I was the only breathing soul in my own home. I realized then that they had not just stolen my money, they had stolen my peace, my presence, and my right to exist comfortably in my own skin. Later that week, while drinking coffee and looking out over the city skyline, I decided to check Instagram. I usually avoided Fallon's page because it just made me angry, but morbid curiosity got the better of me. Her feed was flooded with perfectly curated pictures of their Florida vacation. There was Fallon posing in a tiny bikini by a pristine resort pool, holding a $20 cocktail. There were my parents, looking tanned and relaxed, eating huge plates of expensive seafood at a beachfront restaurant. The captions were filled with hashtags about manifesting wealth, healing journeys, and living the luxury lifestyle. I zoomed in on a photo of my father paying for a massive dinner spread. Sitting on the table next to his hand was a sleek, heavy metal credit card. I recognized the branding. It was a premium travel rewards card, the kind that requires an excellent credit score and charges a massive annual fee. My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact my parents had terrible credit. They could not even get a store card at the local mall. I opened my laptop and pulled up my credit monitoring service. I scrolled through the recent inquiries and open accounts. And there it was. Just 2 weeks ago, a new premium travel credit card had been opened. It was in my father's name, but it was tied directly to my home address, using my house as the primary collateral asset to secure a massive $25,000 credit limit. They had used the illusion of homeownership, the very illusion I had protected for them to save my father's pride, to commit financial fraud and fund a luxury vacation. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold, dark wave of vindication wash over me. Any lingering guilt I might have felt about leaving them homeless vanished into thin air. They were not victims. They were parasites, draining me dry and using my own foundation to build their house of cards. They thought they had secured a $25,000 playground. They had no idea they were about to return to a pile of ash. The real estate contract stipulated that the house had to be entirely empty and broom clean by Friday at 5 in the evening. I was not going to leave a single hairpin behind. I wanted this eviction to be surgical, undeniable, and utterly devastating in its precision. I hired a premium, bonded moving company. I paid extra for their elite packing service. On Wednesday morning, a crew of 6 professional movers in uniform arrived at the house with stacks of heavy-duty boxes, industrial bubble wrap, and labeling machines. I stood in the entryway and gave the foreman his instructions. I need every single item in this house packed, I told him, except for the kitchen appliances and the bathroom fixtures. Every piece of clothing, every piece of furniture, every toothbrush, every single decorative pillow. But I need you to be incredibly careful. Do not break anything. Inventory every box. I wanted to make it exceptionally clear that I was not doing this out of chaotic malice. I was not throwing their belongings onto the front lawn in the rain. I was ending my financial support of 3 grown adults, and I was doing it by the book. I watched as the movers systematically dismantled the life my family had built on my dime. They wrapped Fallon's expensive ring lights in thick layers of protective foam. They carefully boxed up her hundreds of high-end skincare products, her designer handbags, and her ridiculous silk robes. They dismantled my father's heavy recliner and wrapped it in moving blankets. They packed my mother's organic pantry items into sturdy crates. It took them 2 full days to pack the entire 4-bedroom house. When they were finished, the place echoed. It was just bare floors and empty walls. The aesthetic was gone. The toxic energy was packed into brown cardboard boxes. I had the moving trucks drive directly to a high-end, climate-controlled storage facility on the other side of town. I rented a massive unit in my father's name. I paid the facility for 90 days of storage in advance, using the very last bit of money I intended to ever spend on them. 90 days was more than generous. It gave them 3 full months to figure out their lives without losing a single possession. I stood in the storage facility office and wrote out an email on my phone. I addressed it to my father, my mother, and Fallon. The house has been sold. You no longer have any legal right to access the property. I have hired professional movers to carefully pack every single item you own. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was thrown away. All of your belongings are safely stored at the Safekeep storage facility on Trent Avenue. The unit number is 402. The access gate code is your birth year, Dad. I have prepaid the unit for 90 days. After 90 days, the contents are your sole responsibility. Do not attempt to go back to the house. Do not try to contact me. Have a safe flight home. I attached a PDF copy of the paid storage invoice, the mover's inventory manifest, and a scanned copy of the county's deed transfer confirmation, proving that the house now belonged to someone else. I did not hit send immediately. I used a scheduling tool to delay the delivery. Their flight from Florida was scheduled to land at Roanoke-Blacksburg Regional Airport at 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. I set the email to automatically send at exactly 2:15. They would receive it just as they were turning on their phones while taxiing to the gate, carrying their fake tans and their stolen credit card debt. I handed the keys over to Mr. and Mrs. Yates on Friday evening. The house smelled like bleach and fresh paint. Mrs. Yates hugged me, thanking me for making the process so smooth. I forced a smile, wished them the best, and walked away from the property for the very last time. I spent the weekend in my new apartment, unpacking my small duffel bag, buying a new mattress, and setting up my life. I went to the grocery store and bought exactly what I wanted to eat, without having to consult a wellness diet or worry about someone stealing my expensive almond milk. I drank cheap beer on my balcony and watched the city lights flicker to life. It is a strange feeling, dismantling a family. It goes against everything society teaches you. We are told that blood is thicker than water, that you must endure whatever your parents dish out because they gave you life. But what happens when the people who gave you life try to bury you alive? Pause for a second. Put yourself in my steel-toed boots. You work 14-hour days, you pay for everything, you hide your success to protect their fragile egos, and in return, they throw away your grandfather's legacy and call you garbage in your own living room. Do you think I was wrong to sell the house while they were away? Do you think packing their belongings carefully into storage was too harsh? Or do you think I should have sat them down and subjected myself to another round of screaming and manipulation? Tell me what you would have done. Leave a comment with the number 1 if you think my surgical strike was justified, or number 2 if you think I crossed a line. Regardless of what you think, the trap was set. Sunday afternoon was rapidly approaching, and the golden child was about to fall out of the sky and hit the unforgiving pavement of reality. I was not there to witness the explosion in person. I did not want to give them the satisfaction of seeing my face, of having a target to scream at. I wanted them to face the cold, unfeeling wall of legal reality without me there to act as a buffer. But I heard exactly how it went down, detailed blow by blow later that evening by the new owner, Officer Yates, who found the entire ordeal both highly amusing and profoundly disturbing. At 2:30 on Sunday afternoon, an expensive airport taxi pulled into the driveway of the house. Fallon stepped out first, wearing oversized designer sunglasses and carrying a luxury travel tote she bought on my father's fraudulent credit card. My parents followed, dragging heavy suitcases, looking exhausted but smug, ready to resume their lives of leisure in a house they did not own. Apparently, they did not check their emails when they landed. Fallon strutted up the front walkway, complaining loudly about the humidity ruining her hair. She marched up to the front door, pulled her house key from her designer bag, and shoved it into the deadbolt. It did not turn. She jiggled it. She pushed her weight against the door. Nothing happened. The locks had been professionally changed on Friday morning. My father stomped up the steps, aggressively pushing Fallon aside. "Give me that. You're doing it wrong," he grumbled, taking his own key and jamming it into the lock. He twisted it so hard the metal nearly snapped, but the door remained sealed shut. That is when the front door swung open from the inside. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Yates. He was a broad-shouldered man, wearing a casual t-shirt and jeans, holding a cup of coffee. One of his rescue dogs trotted up beside him, barking sharply at the strangers on the porch. My family froze. They stared at this strange, imposing man standing in what they believed was their foyer. Fallon was the first to react. Her entitlement overrode her confusion. She ripped off her sunglasses and started screaming. "Who the hell are you? What are you doing in our house? Get out right now before I call the police. You are trespassing." My father puffed out his chest, stepping forward aggressively, trying to use his physical size to intimidate Yates. "Listen to me, buddy. I don't know how you got in here, but you have exactly 10 seconds to get off my property before I drag you out by your neck." Yates did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He had spent 20 years dealing with violent criminals and domestic disturbances. A shouting, overweight man and a screaming influencer did not impress him. He took a sip of his coffee, looked at my father calmly, and said, "Sir, you need to step off my porch immediately." "Your porch?" my father roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "I own this house. My name is Barrett, and this is my property. I'm calling the cops." "Please do," Yates replied smoothly. "In fact, I am an off-duty officer with the Roanoke County Police. And I can assure you, you do not own this house. My wife and I closed on this property on Friday. The deed is recorded with the county clerk. If you do not step off my property right now, I will officially arrest you for trespassing and terroristic threats." The color instantly drained from my father's face. The bluster vanished, replaced by a profound, sickening confusion. Fallon refused to believe it. "You're lying. You're a squatter. Sutton would never do this. She doesn't have the guts. This is our house." Yates reached over to a small table near the door, picked up a thick manila folder, and walked out onto the porch. He pulled out the official, stamped county deed transfer document. He held it up right in front of my father's face. "Read the grantor line, sir," Yates commanded. My father squinted at the paper. There, in stark black ink, was my full legal name, transferring the property to Mr. and Mrs. Yates. His name was nowhere on the document. It never had been. My mother let out a loud, piercing wail and collapsed onto one of her suitcases, burying her face in her hands. Fallon literally fell to her knees on the concrete driveway. The pristine aesthetic she worked so hard to maintain shattered into a million pieces. She started hyperventilating, screaming my name, screaming at Yates, screaming at the sky. Yates looked down at them with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I suggest you check your emails, folks. The previous owner mentioned she sent you detailed instructions regarding your belongings. Now, I am going to ask you one last time. Get off my property, or I am calling a black and white to haul you all down to the station." They scrambled. The sheer terror of being arrested finally broke through their delusion. They dragged their heavy suitcases down the driveway, the wheels scraping loudly against the concrete, and stood on the public sidewalk, looking like castaways stranded on a desert island. That is where they were standing when my father finally pulled his phone out of his pocket and saw the email notification. He opened it. He read the invoice. He read the storage facility address. He read the bitter truth. The house was gone. The furniture was gone. The free ride was permanently over. The load-bearing pillar had walked away, and the roof had finally crashed down, burying them in the rubble of their own breathtaking arrogance. I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun slowly dip below the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting long, dark shadows over the city. I held a glass of cheap red wine in my hand, feeling an overwhelming sense of calm. My phone, sitting on the small patio table, had been vibrating violently for 3 solid hours. I looked at the screen. 67 missed calls. 40 from my father. 20 from Fallon. 7 from my mother. The voicemail icon showed a full mailbox. Text messages were pouring in like a digital avalanche, a chaotic mix of furious threats, desperate begging, and vile insults. "Dad, answer the phone right now. You cannot do this. This is illegal. Fallon, you're a psychopath. Where is my stuff? I am going to sue you for everything you have. Mom, Sutton, please. We are sitting on the sidewalk. Where are we supposed to sleep tonight? Please, baby, call us back." I took a slow sip of wine. I let them panic in the dark for another hour. Let them feel the crushing weight of housing insecurity that they had shielded themselves from using my paycheck for 7 years. At exactly 7 in the evening, my phone lit up again. It was my father. I swiped the green button and held the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. "Sutton," my father yelled, his voice ragged and hoarse from screaming. "What the hell have you done? Do you have any idea the humiliation we just went through? A cop threatened to arrest me on my own front lawn." "It wasn't your lawn, Dad," I said, my voice shockingly calm. "It hasn't been your lawn for 84 months. You stole our house," he roared, ignoring reality entirely. "We are your family. You threw us out on the street like garbage." "Garbage," I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. That's a very interesting choice of words. Because just 22 days ago, Fallon looked me in the eye and called me a piece of garbage. And you stood right next to her and told me to find my own place. So I did. I found my own place. I just happened to sell the house you were staying in to fund it. There was a heavy, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The bluster was running out of steam, hitting the brick wall of my cold indifference. "Sutton, please," he said, his voice dropping an octave, trying a new tactic. the disappointed patriarch. We have no money. We spent everything we had on that Florida trip. We have nowhere to go. You have to fix this. Give us the money from the house sale so we can buy a new place. I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound of pure disbelief. Let's talk about money, Dad, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Let's talk about the 84 mortgage payments I made. Let's talk about the property taxes, the insurance, the water bill, the electric bill, the groceries. Let's talk about the new roof I put on 3 years ago. I did the math last night. Over the last 7 years, I have spent $155,000 keeping a roof over your heads and food in your stomachs. $155,000. And in return, you threw away Grandpa's blueprints and told me I was ruining Fallon's aesthetic. I paid for things, he stammered, scrambling for purchase in an argument he had already lost. Name one, I challenged him instantly. Name one utility bill you paid. Name 1 month of rent you gave me. You can't. Because you didn't. Then, the truth finally bled out of him. The massive, pathetic lie he had been telling himself for nearly a decade. I had to protect my family, he yelled, his voice cracking, shedding the tough guy persona entirely. I'm the father. I'm supposed to be the provider. When I lost my job, I felt like a failure. Telling the neighbors it was my house, letting Fallon think I was supporting her, it was the only way I could look at myself in the mirror, Sutton. If I admitted that my 21-year-old daughter was paying for everything, I would have been nothing. I had to save face. I closed my eyes. The sheer, tragic patheticness of it hit me hard. He didn't hate me. He hated himself. And he used my life, my youth, and my money as a shield to hide his own massive insecurities. He allowed Fallon to treat me like dirt because elevating me meant admitting his own profound failure. You saved your face by stepping on my neck, I told him quietly. And you raised a monster in the process. I prepaid the storage unit for 90 days. Everything you own is in there. I suggest you find a cheap motel tonight and start looking for jobs tomorrow. Do not ever call me again. I hung up the phone. I went into the settings and blocked his number. Then I blocked Fallon. Then I blocked my mother. The screen went dark and the silence of my apartment returned, thick and comforting. The power dynamic had officially shifted. They were no longer the kings and queens of a castle they stole. They were just 3 broke adults standing on a sidewalk with a mountain of luggage and a reality check they couldn't afford to cash. When you cut off toxic family members, you do not just fight the main villains. You have to prepare for the swarm. The flying monkeys. The extended relatives who only hear one highly edited, victimized side of the story and make it their personal mission to drag you back into the cult of family loyalty. My swarm arrived the very next morning at exactly 8 o'clock, right as I was walking into the roofing company office. My phone rang and the caller ID flashed the name of my Aunt Tamsin. Tamsin is my mother's older sister. She is a woman who lives entirely on drama, gossip, and judging other people's lives while ignoring the massive failures in her own. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello, Aunt Tamsin. I didn't even get to finish the greeting before she launched into a screeching tirade. Sutton Marie, you are the most evil, vindictive, disgusting child I have ever had the misfortune of knowing. Tamsin shrieked, her voice echoing in my truck cabin. Your poor mother called me sobbing hysterically at midnight from a filthy roadside motel. She said you illegally sold their house out from under them while they were on vacation and threw all their precious belongings into a dumpster. How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? Your father is having chest pains. You are going straight to hell for abandoning your family. She didn't take a breath. She just kept screaming about duty, honor, and how Fallon was too fragile to handle this kind of trauma. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, preparing to defend myself, preparing to read out the spreadsheet of my financial sacrifices. But suddenly, there was a loud scuffling sound on the other end of the line. I heard a man's gruff voice yelling in the background. Give me the damn phone, Tamsin. Give it here right now. It was Uncle Grady. There was a brief struggle, a yelp from Tamsin, and then the line went eerily quiet, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Sutton? Kid, you there? Uncle Grady's rough, gravelly voice came through the speaker. I'm here, Uncle Grady, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Put me on speakerphone if you aren't already, he commanded. I tapped the screen. Listen to me very carefully, Tamsin, Uncle Grady boomed into the phone, clearly addressing his wife in the room with him. And I want you to spread this to every single gossiping busybody in this family who tries to run their mouth about this girl. Sutton didn't steal their house. Sutton bought that house 7 years ago with her own damn money. She paid the mortgage every single month while Barrett sat on his ass and played pretend millionaire. She fed them. She clothed that spoiled brat Fallon. Grady, Barrett said. Tamsin tried to interrupt, sounding much smaller now. Barrett is a liar and a leech. Grady roared, silencing her instantly. He lied to you, he lied to the neighbors, and he lied to himself. Sutton funded their entire existence for 7 years, and they treated her like the dirt on their shoes. And that fancy Florida vacation they just took? The one they bragged about on Facebook? They paid for it by opening a fraudulent credit card using Sutton's home address to secure a $25,000 limit. They're thieves. I sat in my truck, stunned into total silence. Uncle Grady had known. He had always known the score, but now he was dropping the tactical nuke on the family rumor mill. I am proud of my niece, Grady continued, his voice fierce and unyielding. She finally cut the boil. And if I hear that you, or anyone else in this family, calls her to harass her, to guilt-trip her, or to bother her in any way, I swear to God I will call in every single favor and debt this family owes me. I will tell the whole church congregation about Barrett's credit card fraud. I will scorch the earth. Do you understand me, Tamsin? Yes, Tamsin squeaked, utterly defeated. Good. Hang up, Grady ordered. The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot of the roofing company and put my head on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just took a massive, shuddering breath. The flying monkeys had their wings clipped before they even got off the ground. The truth was out there now, guarded by a mechanic with a temper who refused to let me be the villain in their fabricated tragedy. From what I heard through the grapevine later that month, reality hit my parents and Fallon with the force of a freight train. They stayed in a cheap, run-down motel near the highway for 3 weeks, burning through the very last of the cash advance on the fraudulent credit card. When that ran out, they had to face the music. Because they had terrible credit, no rental history in the last 7 years, and zero savings, no reputable landlord in Roanoke would touch them. They eventually had to settle for a cramped, damp 2-bedroom apartment in a very rough part of town, signing a predatory lease just to get a roof over their heads. The lifestyle influencer facade crumbled into dust. Fallon couldn't film luxury vlogs in a dingy apartment with peeling paint. Her followers noticed. Her views tanked. The fake friends she bought with my mother's stolen money vanished the second she couldn't afford to buy overpriced drinks downtown. For the first time in their lives, there was no invisible truss holding up the ceiling. They were entirely, brutally on their own. A full year has passed since the day I walked out of that house with my duffel bag and my grandfather's blueprints. 12 months of uninterrupted peace, quiet mornings, and a bank account that actually grows instead of violently hemorrhaging cash every 30 days. My life has changed in ways I never thought possible when I was trapped in that cycle of obligation. 6 months ago, the owner of the roofing company pulled me into his office. He told me that my management of the hospital wing project was flawless, that the crews respected me more than any manager they'd ever had. He offered me a promotion to Regional Director of Operations. It came with a massive salary increase, a company truck, and a real, tangible sense of authority. I took the new salary and bought a house. Not a 4-bedroom anchor meant to house a dysfunctional family, but a beautiful, historic 2-bedroom cottage in the quiet suburbs, surrounded by old oak trees. I framed my grandfather's original blueprints and hung them right in the center of the living room, proudly displaying the legacy they tried to throw in the trash. I bought a new acoustic guitar. I play it on the porch in the evenings, and nobody tells me I'm ruining the aesthetic. As for my family, news still trickles down to me through Uncle Grady, who comes over for a beer on my porch once a month. The fall of the golden child was spectacular and entirely predictable. Faced with mounting credit card debt and the harsh reality of paying rent, Fallon was forced to do the unthinkable, get a real job. She currently works 35 hours a week as a cashier at a discount grocery store. She has to wear a bright green polyester uniform and stand on her feet all day, dealing with rude customers. Her Instagram account has been deleted entirely. My parents are drowning in the consequences of their own actions. The massive premium credit card bill they racked up in Florida came due. Because they couldn't pay it, the interest rates skyrocketed. My father had to go back to work, taking a grueling night shift job as a security guard at a warehouse. My mother had to ask the dental clinic for full-time hours. They spend their days exhausted, arguing about money in a cramped apartment, trapped in the exact miserable life they had successfully avoided for 7 years by feeding on my success. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on my porch and think about the philosophy of family. We are conditioned from birth to believe that we must set ourselves on fire to keep our family members warm. We are told that drawing boundaries is selfish, that walking away is a betrayal. But here is the absolute truth I learned the hard way. When you stop acting like a spotlight illuminating other people's lives, you finally realize that they are just terrified people hiding in the dark. You cannot build a foundation for someone who refuses to stand on their own 2 feet. If you spend your whole life holding up a roof for people who resent you, eventually, your arms will break. And when you collapse, they will simply complain about the dust. I don't hate them anymore. Hate takes too much energy, too much investment. I just feel a profound, cold indifference toward them. They made their choices, they established their priorities, and I simply forced them to live within the parameters they created. Last week, I went out to my mailbox. Inside was a small, cheap envelope. I opened it up, and a generic, mass-produced greeting card fell out. It was signed by my mother, my father, and Fallon. The message inside was brief. It said, "Sutton, we miss you. We hope you are doing well. Family is forever, and we want to heal this rift. Please call us so we can be a family again." I read the card twice. I traced the handwriting. I knew exactly what it meant. They didn't miss me. They didn't miss my laugh, or my company, or my personality. They missed my paycheck. They missed the comfortable house. They missed the convenience of having a silent, invisible workhorse to carry their burdens. They were tired of working, tired of being poor, and they wanted their ATM back. I walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and pulled up the detailed spreadsheet I had created the night I left them. I printed out a single, stark sheet of paper. It detailed the 84 mortgage payments, the utilities, the groceries, the property taxes, and the insurance premiums. At the very bottom, in bold black ink, was the grand total: $155,000. I folded the spreadsheet carefully, slipped it into the greeting card they sent me, and put it in a fresh envelope. I wrote their new apartment address on the front. I haven't mailed it yet. It is sitting on my kitchen counter, waiting. So, I turn to you, the people who have listened to my story, who understand what it feels like to be the unseen pillar in a toxic house. I need you to be my jury on this final decision. Should I simply throw the card in the trash, maintain my absolute silence, and never look back? Or should I put a stamp on that envelope and mail them an invoice for $155,000 to remind them exactly what my presence in the family actually cost? Let me know what you think I should do down in the comments. I read every single one of them. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you found any validation or comfort in my experience, or if you have survived a toxic family dynamic yourself, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. Your support helps bring these stories to light for people who need to hear them. Stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone treat you like a guest in the life you built.